welcome to another episode of Come and See. Today we have a subject that is taboo, one that we don't talk about, I think, at all, but one that needs to be discussed. We're going to talk about pornography and masturbation. So we have 3 guests with us today. Can you introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm David.
I'm Myrna.
And I'm John.
Okay, so let's start with the first question. Is masturbation wrong? John?
Simply, yes. But I guess to answer why it's wrong.
Well, before you answer why,
Okay.
is it wrong in the eyes of society, church, or both? Because I think society would say that it's a natural act that everybody does, but how are you seeing it? Are you saying it's wrong from both aspects, just one?
I mean, I think if you're talking about 2017 society, yes, it's normal. People accept it like it's a regular part of life. But even societally, back in the day, it wasn't normal. It was very taboo. You couldn't talk about it because people didn't view it as a normal thing. And I think that's because back in the day, more in historical times, people were more attached to the church religious aspect of whether this is right or wrong. So when I said it's wrong, I am basing it on the church and on the faith. But I think in history, some parts of society also viewed it as wrong. Nowadays, it's viewed as totally normal.
Okay. I want to hear your opinion as a servant in the church. Do you feel like it's something that affects our youth today?
Yeah, without a doubt.
A large percentage, a small percentage, men, women?
I don't think men and women matter.
Okay.
I think this is a subject that touches both sexes.
Okay.
I think men are less embarrassed to talk about it.
Okay.
So that's why it seems like maybe more men or boys go through it than women or girls. But I think when you get to know the kids you're serving, and even when you talk to Abuna, he'll tell you that this is a problem that I won't give a percentage,
Okay.
so it doesn't scare everybody, but it is a more than half, I would say.
So it's quite high.
It's quite high, and it's unexpected, and there are things to look out for, but yeah, it's quite high.
So I guess from the one woman on the panel, do you have similar opinions to what John is saying? Is it wrong?
So, in the eyes of the church, it is wrong. It's considered sinful. I actually did want to piggyback on one point that you made, John. It is the same for both men and women. I think
Percentage-wise?
I think we
Okay.
have similar struggles. And you mentioned that women or girls are more embarrassed about talking about the subject. But I feel like there's an extra taboo with females because we're considered appropriate, and it's not an appropriate subject to talk about, which is why I think it's so taboo, especially in the church.
And we're not ones to talk about sexual needs
Yeah.
at all.
Exactly.
Okay.
So men are a lot more, I would say, vocal about, their sexual needs, their desires, especially with their friends who egg each other on or sort of peer pressure. Like they pressure each other to losing their virginity early or things along that spectrum. So I think it does escalate from one thing to another. But back to my original topic was, it is easier for men to talk about than it is for women, but I think it's so important for women to talk about it as well, because if you don't talk about it, you don't know that they're doing it, and you can't guide them spiritually. If any of that actually makes sense.
It does, yeah, it makes perfect.
Yes, and that was my point, and I think it's so important for women to talk about it as well, because if you don't know that the problem exists, you can't do anything about it.
Okay. David, our only teenager on the panel today. I'm sure this is something that you view as normal in society around you. Is that correct? Or please correct me if I'm wrong. Do you think it is normal that it is happening around you?
At church, from a Christian point of view, we don't talk about it much unless it's like at a retreat, or if the subject came up at a Sunday school lesson or something like that. But otherwise, it doesn't come up as a normal topic that we discuss. But from the church standpoint, it's definitely wrong.
Okay.
It's definitely viewed as a sin, and that like you need to like get help.
Yes.
In a way of like stopping it and like getting closer to God. At school, what I see and what I've heard from the stories and the conversations is that most guys from what I've heard is that they view it as something normal.
Okay.
Something that they, some of them take pride in doing this action and doing like the lustful sin. But like as far as the church is concerned, it is wrong. It's not something that's normal. It definitely shouldn't be something that's part of you.
So you're giving me a great answer. You're giving me the church's answer, which is wonderful, but I've already heard that from both of them. So what I'm concentrating on now is, how is it viewed in your school? And you did say that it's viewed as something normal and people take pride in it. And I'm sure that sometimes when the boys are just being boys and kind of sitting together and talking, they're comparing stories and so on. Do you ever feel like you're an outsider when you're not participating in these topics, when you're not participating in these stories, when you're not sharing anything with them?
For me, it's something like I don't take much. Like I don't feel that like I'm missing out on the stories that they tell or the things that they take pride in. For me, it's something like good for you, but no thank you. Like I don't. If anyone, for example, if anyone ever asked me if I was a virgin, my answer was always no, and most people would be like, "What?" and they would be surprised, even though I'm at a very young age, and you shouldn't have lost something so precious at such a young age. But to me, I never regretted once saying no or saying that I don't want to or anything like that.
Okay, so I think maybe the audience didn't understand. Did you say no, you are a virgin, or no, you're not a virgin?
I am a virgin.
I'm sorry, I understood that, but I think maybe the question wasn't. I'm sorry to embarrass you, but the question wasn't clear. Anyways, let's move on to Jean. Is masturbation really that bad? I mean, I know it's a sin. Does it hurt you?
Okay, so I'll talk to you from personal experience.
Okay.
And I think I'm old enough. I don't really care what anybody thinks anyway. But I've gone through a time period in my life where pornography and masturbation was a huge part of my life, and I think the reason God views it as a sinful act, the reason it is a sinful act, is because it's destroying who you are. It's destroying what God built you to be. And I could tell you that during this time, when I was going through this, one, it becomes an addiction, right?
Okay.
It's nothing that you can just stop and go with whenever you want. It's something that you really can't control. And even though right after you finish the act, like after you finish masturbating, you feel like crap, right? But quickly the devil can brush that off for you and make it okay again a day later, right? So you're stuck in this cycle and you're stuck in this act, and it's a sin because it's literally breaking things inside of you. God understands that as men or as women, we're gonna need sex. It's a part of what He built that inside of us, right? The only situation is the timing and who it's done with. It's not crazy and it's not weird that marriage is one of the 7 sacraments. So one of the 7 most important things in our church happens to involve sex, right? So God understands the need, it's sinful and it's damaging because we take that need and we decide to fulfill it in our own timetable rather than following His. And when I was, going through that time period, and this is like a couple of years, it wasn't like once or twice, it's a couple of years where you are addicted, you're stuck in this situation. There's no way I could have gotten married. There's no way I was like mentally or emotionally stable enough to take that step. So it breaks certain things inside of you. You become more reclusive. You want to spend more time with yourself. And with how easy it is to view pornography online, I mean, they say 4 out of every 5 sites on the internet are pornographic. So it doesn't take much for you to find what you want on the internet when it comes to pornography. And the devil is really clever to making sure that there's also like a variety of everything you want to see online when it comes to pornography, just so you don't get bored, right? But it really does change you. You're not the same person. And I think that's why God understands, and explains to us why this is a sinful act, because it's literally destroying His children.
So what you said is very interesting to me, because I feel like I am one of many people that view this as maybe something that's just pleasurable for a moment. I never really thought it can affect your psychological thinking, or it affects you in that way. So I think maybe a lot of people think the same way.
The thing is this: when you introduced the episode, you said it's a taboo subject.
It is. It's one that no one talks about.
And people, it's very hard for somebody to walk up to you and tell you, yes, I used to masturbate for this long, or I do it now, or I watch pornography. Because they understand what you're going to view them as. They understand you're going to view them as, okay, that's kind of weird, even though they themselves might be doing it.
Exactly, even though the majority of the people are actually doing this, but we still judge each other.
And this is the nice ring that the devil likes to put you in the middle of.
Okay.
Right? If I can convince you that this act is pleasurable and great and you should be doing it, and then I can convince you that you should never tell anybody you're doing it because it's also so shameful and how could you be doing it, then you're left by yourself. Right? Like, it's a sin when you can't openly talk about it. It's a sin when you're not like hanging out with people, like, and you could just do it. Like, this is something that you go and you close yourself in a corner somewhere, do it by yourself, and then, walk as a different person in front of people. It's a complicated sin and it's a complicated addiction.
Okay.
But when you do talk about it, and when you do bring it up to your father of confession, or when you do break that ring that's built around you and you're not by yourself, and you start telling people that you can trust, then you'll be able to get the help you need.
Okay, so I'm going to play the devil's advocate for a second here. I think some people may say that masturbation is better or is less of a sin than losing your virginity pre-marriage. Is this something that you think is true? I understand that the church says sin is sin, but in the eyes of a lot of people, we may think that masturbation is not such a huge deal as losing your virginity, something that you can never regain. So, Myrna, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll address this one. So, in the eyes of the church, a sin is a sin, and there are no varying degrees of sin. A sin is a sin, and that's clear cut. Masturbation is not better than losing your virginity, but I do think it's important to discuss it with your father of confession. And the reason I say that is because your father of confession can give you advice based, they know you, they've known you for a long time, at least that's how it's supposed to be, you're supposed to build a relationship with them, and they know your problems a lot of times a lot better than even you know them, because they get to listen to that part of you that you don't share with a lot of people. Sometimes you only share that part of you with just them. So they're able to gear their advice to your particular problem to help you kind of wean off of it. For example, if you're addicted to drugs, you can't just stop taking drugs cold turkey. it will kill you.
You go through
To go
like
you will
a
go through
recovery
withdrawal.
plan. Okay.
Exactly. So you have to go through a recovery. And if your father of confession knows that and knows your problem, they can help kind of wean you off of that problem.
Okay.
So they will give you the advice. So not the advice that they give me is definitely not going to be the same advice they give you or John or David. It's going to be geared to your particular problem. So that way that they can best help you in your particular situation.
Now, let's switch gears for a second. As a psychologist, and I told you that I was going to ask you a question from that aspect, what are ways to avoid this temptation? I know we had spoken previously in another episode about stress and ways to kind of deal with it and so on. Are there similar things that you could do to avoid this temptation psychologically?
So, psychologically or not, I really think it's important to stay out of the temptation altogether.
Okay.
If you don't put yourself in that situation, then you won't be tempted to go through it.
Okay.
And by this, I mean, if you're in like that mood where you just want to be alone, you want to be in your room, and all you can think about is masturbation, a good way to do it is distract yourself with something else.
Okay.
If you've got hobbies, do the hobby. And I said this about stress as well. It's always good to kind of shift your focus from that, because when you're focused on something, especially like an addiction like masturbation, you're focused on it, you're like, oh, I'm going to get home, and you're planning it. Like, I'm going to get home, blah, blah, blah. You're going to go in your room, like, oh, nobody's home today, so this is a good day to do it. But if you know that if you're that focused on it, shift your focus to something else that you enjoy equally.
Okay.
You know, you don't just derive pleasure from masturbation, you can also derive pleasure from other hobbies.
Okay.
Like if you play sports, that's a good way, and it gets the adrenaline going. Same bodily hormones.
David, same question for you. So how do you feel that you can distract yourself from this temptation?
What my servants have told me in the past when the subject has been brought up is that if you are, like Myrna said, that if you are sitting by yourself or if you're thinking about it, you're watching TV or on the internet, is to basically pull yourself out of that situation and take yourself out of the temptation. What my servants have told me is to, if for instance, if I'm watching TV and something comes up that's inappropriate, I should turn the TV off. If there's somebody home, I should go hang out with that person. If nobody's home, like go outside, play basketball, ride your bike, do anything like that.
So you stay distracted.
Yeah, keep yourself busy.
Okay. John, I'm going to ask you a personal question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So we've touched on the subject of if it's easy or not to stop. So I'm going to ask you this. How did you stop? Because I think that your story might relate to others out there, and it might actually help them do the same. It might help them stop.
So I'll tell you this. Myrna brought up an awesome point up. You need all the help you can get.
Okay.
Right, it's just like any other addiction. A lot of times, you don't get over the addiction by yourself, right? There are people that care for you, that help you, they do interventions, things like that. With this specific thing, because it's so personal, a father of confession is perfect. They're bound to silence, right? So nobody will ever know. It's just you and him, and that is it. They'll take it to the grave,
Yes.
right? So go talk to your father of confession. And that's what I did, because I realized that I was stuck in the cycle, and I knew it was a sin. It wasn't like I couldn't really trick myself into thinking it wasn't, right? But, and the beauty of having a father of confession is that the majority of them, if not all of them, are very patient, and they should, in all times, look at you exactly the same way God looks at you, and treat you exactly the same way God treats you, which is differently than everybody else. It's not like a cookie cutter, scenario for everyone. So with me, my father of confession knew how stuck I was inside of it, and he started giving me pieces of advice, like David mentioned. Try to like stand up and start saying a prayer. It's very hard to masturbate when you're praying. Like, your mind just will not let you do it. Okay, I know it's funny, but it's true, right? When I said, look, you're about to masturbate, get up and start saying our Father. Like, the devil's going to lose all power. You're really going to have a hard time doing that because now you're bringing God into your presence.
Okay.
And I went through many, many confessions of saying, I did great for a week and then I fell again. I did great for 3 days and then I fell again. I did great for a month and then I fell again. But over time, the more and more I talked about it with my Father of Confession, the less the grip of the sin had over me. And it's literally like something holding you and gripping you in its hand. And the more you talk about it, the weaker that grip gets. And the weaker that grip gets, the longer you go without masturbating, the longer you go without watching any pornography. And eventually it just becomes a part of your past and you no longer fall into it. And God, if there's nothing else we know about God, is that He is faithful, right? Mm-hmm. If He's willing to send His Son to die for us, then He's going to keep His word. And it's just a matter of struggling with your Father of Confession, with the sin. Eventually God's going to give you power over it and you will win. It took 2 years for me to win. In 2 years, that's 365 days times 2 times 24 hours times 60 minutes. It's not a snapshot. It's a long process, but you'll win. It just takes a while, and it takes effort, and it takes, like being cognizant, like David said, and not allowing yourself to go into, your dark bedroom at night when nobody's around. Understand where you fall into the sin and avoid it. And like I said, that existence of that one person that you can run to and talk to in this situation, I think the best person is Abuna, is super important.
So I definitely agree with you. You do need all the help that you can get. But my question here, and it's more of a practical one, I mean, show of hands, who feels embarrassed to talk to their Father of Confession about certain things sometimes? I mean, I definitely do. And I think everyone does. How do you bring up a subject like that to your Father of Confession or to anyone else around you to get the support that you need? I think it's one of the hardest things. So if you can get past this one step, yes, you're starting on the path to recovery or to stopping and so on. But tell me how to get this one initial step taken. It's one of the hardest to do.
I think you have to realize what your Father of Confession's job is.
Okay.
I promise you, whoever's watching, you're not the first to go tell him I masturbated and I watched pornography. There's no way you're the first, unless he was like, you're the first confession he has, okay, hold off for a little bit, let somebody else be the first. But at the end of the day, you're not the first, okay? There's a lot of people that are masturbating. There's a lot of people watching pornography, and they're all struggling the same way you are. So to be embarrassed is to really think you're special and that you're the only one struggling and the devil is not attacking anyone else. I'm telling you, it's more than 50%, and I'm only a servant, and I know this. So there's no way you're going to walk in and, shock Abuna. Abuna's not going to look at you and be like, what? You did what? That's never happened to me in any confession. And I've confessed almost every sin you can think of. And never once was Abuna like, oh my God, I need a moment. Like, that doesn't happen. He's heard it before, many people, and he'll guide you. It's simple.
So what I'm understanding is to get through this, you need to surround yourself by everyone that can help. And the first person that you should reach out to, and in my opinion, the only person at that time should be your Father of Confession. Later on, if he advises you to go to someone else, maybe a professional or a counselor or anything else, or even your parents, then that is something that will come from him and after discussions between the two of you. And I think that taking that step would be a very good way to get assistance, get help, stop eventually. And the second thing that I think I gathered from everyone here is that don't be embarrassed. You're not the only one who's doing it. And by being embarrassed, I think that the devil is playing with your head even more and making you think that it's something no one does. You're the only one. And that is unforgivable and that you will be judged. So that's something that you need to completely remove from your head. Know that it is not true and that you can stop if you put your mind to it. Am I on the right track here?
100%.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for watching this episode with us.